Hello, everybody. Everybody, assuming that everybody is watching this, more like 5 people, if I'm lucky. Anyway, this is Monica Volkmar, and we are doing another gait video for Project GaitWay. I had a rare morning where I did not wake up ahead of my alarm, which I usually do. Today I woke up and just was dragging ass. So let's see how my brain works. As per usual, I have not seen this video before. It's my first time checking it out. I'm excited to see what we have in store. Today we're looking at Ashley's legs. Thanks, Ashley, for sending in your video. Ashley has a few complaints she's mentioned. She has a right ankle that hurts in a deep squat, twinges of right knee pain that's happening lately. Not sure if that's a long-standing issue. Moderate back pain lying down at night, and some right shoulder issues. The right side neck and traps always tight and sometimes painfully so. So a lot of right-sided stuff. Ankle, knee, shoulder, neck, and then the lower back. So let's see what we can see. So interestingly, in this first picture we have here, or this is when I ask for these videos, I ask to stand facing the front, side, and back view so we can get a read on their static posture. Not sure if Ashley did this intentionally, but all we can see for her standing postural part is from her legs down. So I'm actually kind of excited about this because this is something that we do as a teaching tool in some anatomy and motion courses. Is we say, well, in theory, if you know where the big toe is, then you can map out where the rest of the body is based on that. And of course, you can't always do that. But if everything is connecting as it ought to mechanically, then you often can make a pretty good prediction about, based on a big toe, where's the rest of the body going to be in space. So let's see what we can infer from just the legs. So we're looking at Ashley's from the front view. The first thing that stands out to me is the differences in her kneecaps. Something I've been looking at lately is if you look at her right kneecap, it looks like the muscles are softer and her kneecap looks like it's pointing more straight at us, more at like a 12 o'clock orientation. Whereas her left kneecap, it looks like the muscles are pulled up a little bit more, like more of the quad is contracting to lift up the kneecap. And her kneecap looks to be pointed out a little bit more towards like 10. Oh, I can't draw. I always draw way too close to the sidebar and it doesn't let me do it. But it looks like she's more at 10 o'clock that kneecap. So that might be indicating to us that her right leg's a little bit more internally rotated and her left leg's a little more externally rotated. Now she's had some, yes, right ankle discomfort in a deep squat. So if you look at her ankles as well, just this area here. To me, it does look like on this side, there's a little bit more of an internal rotation going on through that subtalar joint. Talus looks to be a little more pointing internally. Now it's, of course, difficult to see clearly or accurately because of this amazing lighting. I don't know if she's in a CrossFit gym. It looks kind of like a CrossFit gym. But the lighting here is like disco lighting. So the shadows could be playing a game with my head, but it does also look like to me that across these cuneiform bones, midfoot, she looks a little flatter through here. And here on the left looks just a bit more like lifted. So this would be more indicative of a more dorsiflexed forefoot. And here might be a bit more of a plantar flexed forefoot, meaning more pronation type of mechanics here and more supination type of mechanics here. We'll see from a back view if that is true about what her rear foot is doing. I also detect a little bit more of a valgus in her big toe on this right foot, or AKA bunion. She has a little bit going on the left as well, but it looks more exaggerated on the right. And again, often we see a bunion occurring when there's a bit more, not always, but often if there's a bit more of an internal rotation in the leg and the ankle, the talus, subtalar joint axis pointing more over towards here, then that can cause that excessive amount of abduction in the big toe. And when I say abduction, I mean pointing away from midline of the body, not from the midline of the foot. This is a little bit of a different language use in anatomy and motion. We always refer to the midline of the body when we're talking about adductions and abductions. So this is an abduction of the big toe from the midline of the body. Now, when we see that, it often makes us think about, well, it's like all the pronation in that foot is starting to come from this one joint. So where else in the body might there not be a sufficient amount of pronation that it's all coming from here? So we get to wonder about what that exchange is. So I'm curious about what's happening up top. We also get the sense just from the angle of her legs here that she's kind of shifted over to her left. If I were to exaggerate what I think I'm seeing, it's that her legs are on this kind of a slant. So more pelvis shift to her left, meaning she is standing more on her left leg. So it's an adducted left hip and an abducted right hip. We'll see if that shows up as true as she walks. Another clue about that is, again, if you look at the structure of the forefoot and midfoot, that little supination looking thing going on in her foot there, like the lifting of the arch, the plantar flexion of the forefoot, that often is indicative of where the mass of the body is. If you shift all your weight onto one foot, you'll start to notice that the arch lifts on that foot, and the foot you're shifting away from, in this case, the right foot, the foot will pronate more and will lower the arch. So it's a little clue. It isn't always the case. It can be opposite. And when things are not how you would expect the mechanics to go, that's when you kind of know, oh, there's some interesting things happening in this body. I want to say this knee looks a little more flexed as well. So far we have some things adding up, that there's maybe a bit more of an internally rotated leg with a flexed knee, with a pronated foot and a bit of a bunion, and the weight shifted over to the left. So that would make sense if you're having some left ankle soreness and right knee soreness. So I would want to know, can she supinate this foot? Can she extend this knee? And can she externally rotate her leg? Essentially, can she supinate that entire right leg? All right, let's see a different viewpoint. So we've got a side view here. Whoops. Okay, trying to get her in a point where she looks like she's settled. Nope, just missed it. Okay, come on, let's get this. All right, we'll say there. Okay, so I'm not really sure if this is true or not, but it does look like she actually has this left knee, the kneecap you can see poking forward, more flexed. I thought from the front view, it looked like her right knee was more flexed. So who knows? If we look at her ankle from the side view, we'll have to compare it to the other side to see if there's any difference there. And it's sometimes nice to look at how much space is behind that lateral malleolus. And it's nice to look at if it looks like there's a lot of space under the outside edge of the foot. So let's go to the other side view. Let's see if there's a difference. Does she do the other side view? No. Oh, I don't know if she does. Does she do a back view? Oh, man. Oh, I'm gonna go back to the beginning. Oh, no. I think I'm going backwards. Which way am I going? I'm so lost. Okay, so sorry. I have not watched this video before, so apparently somehow I fast forwarded all the way to the end. I'm not looking at the screen. I'm just looking at the numbers. I'm trying not to look at the actual video. Okay, let's go back to the beginning and do this for real. This is the one downfall of me doing this in real time, is you get to see me really fumbling with technology. Okay, let's get to the other side. No, she doesn't do the other side view. Okay, that's all we got to work with then. You don't even get a back view. All right, let's watch her walk. We'll see what we can go on with that information. So does it look like she's walking with more of her weight in her left foot? It looks to me like her body is really leaned over her right foot. Like her upper body is leaning to the right and kind of rotating to the right. But I do have a sense of more of her pelvis kind of drifting in and staying over her left leg. Her right arm is very interesting. I mean, she said she has the right shoulder thing going on right now. Ooh, do we get more? No, we don't. No. Okay. But look at her right arm, and it doesn't seem to swing as much behind her. Both arms actually look like they don't externally rotate, and her elbows stay quite locked out. So I'm curious. Let's watch that again in full speed. I'm really curious if either of her elbows can flex. Because both look quite extended, and she starts to swing a little bit more as she goes, but that right arm looks, sorry, left arm? I get confused when she turns around. I always get my rights and lefts mixed up. Her left arm, actually, both arms. I can't decide which arm that I want to say. It looks like it moves more or less. Neither arm really externally rotates. What you can see is that her palms from this back view stay pointing towards us. So it looks like her spine is laterally flexed and rotating to the right over her right leg. And hard to tell much about her lower body for me at that speed from this distance, but let's just see one more time. Yeah, I just see her shifting over to the left leg with her pelvis, but not really the right. I see a lot more external rotation in her right lower leg. Let's see if that's actually something that shows up in when we break it down phase by phase. But since both of her arms kind of do the same thing, as in they stay internally rotated, I wonder what her spine motion is like. She can flex and extend her spine very well. She looks quite flexed in her thoracic spine, flexed and only rotating right, laterally flexing right. Now that flexion in her thoracic spine could speak to something about her discomfort in her lower back. So let's see what happens phase by phase. And the lighting may make some things challenging, but that's the fun part. Nothing like a good challenge to make your brain work. Let's start her here in a right early swing. So we do see quite a bit of flexion in her thoracics and what looks to be very high tone lumbar spine erector muscles. So on either side of her spine, those look quite developed. So when I see that kind of thing, like a thoracic spine that looks to be flexed and very toned up lower back muscles, I often am suspicious of how well this person can move in the sagittal plane. So can the thoracic and lumbar extend, and can the thoracic and lumbar flex? And I would suspect that her ability to flex through the lumbars and extend through the thoracics might need a little bit of reorganization. And it does look like we have a bit of like an extension in the neck going on, which would make sense. So we have a bit of a spine that's shaped, if this is the head here. That was bad, but we have some extension in the spine. Could have maybe exaggerated this more to get the point across. Flexion and extension, which is the normal shape of a spine. We want to have these curves. However, we want them to also move out of that state and get into the opposite at each footstep. We should have movement in the spine like that. So I wonder if there is any kind of back injury, like a fall on your tailbone, or bonked your head on something, or just, I don't know, if you are doing any kind of sport or activity that involved a lot of back bending, like dance or gymnastics at one point in your life, or just sitting a lot can develop this kind of posture. Many, many things can get us there. Life. The only other thing I want to say about this is just how close her arms are against her body. Like there's just a lot of, it looks like a lot of squeezing in of her arms, and I'm not sure if that's her normal, just that's structurally what her body does, or if she's kind of bracing with her arms a little bit here. With just one more thing I'll say here about the flexed thoracic spine is what it will do is it will spread both scaps apart, so that will protract and abduct the scaps from each other, which should couple with both arms, meaning the glenohumeral joint, the actual shoulder joint, that will internally rotate both of the arms. And if you try this for yourself and you feel it, if you haven't done this before, if you keep internally rotating your arms, you should feel how that starts to extend your elbows. So these things do all couple together in a way that makes sense. The flexion of the spine and the internal rotation of the arms do link up with each other, but we want that to change throughout her gait cycle, and I don't think it does for her very much. Okay, let's see how she swings her right leg through as her pelvis shifts to the right. Doesn't look like there's much of a shift. That's where we want the pelvis to shift to the right in order for her to transfer her weight onto that leg. You can see her back heel is still quite low to the ground, looking like she's still standing on it quite a bit. Okay, let's see what happens if we go into a right foot pronation, which we'll say is right around there. Looks like she's getting most pronation of her foot. So this is the ankle where she says she has some discomfort. I'm not sure. She doesn't specify which part of her right ankle, if it's the back or if it's the front or if it's the inside or the outside. So these are good things to, if you're speaking with a practitioner, try to be specific about which part of your ankle is it that hurts. It's kind of fun for me not to know. But I mean, if I were actually trying to help Ashley and give her some practical strategies, I'd want to know. But this is just for fun, so it is what it is. We'll have to see this from the front view. In her static stance, it did look like her right foot was more pronated, and it looks like to me there's not a lot of dynamic movement of her foot, but I can get the sense that on the medial side, come on, arrows, the medial side of her foot here, it does look like there's a bit of a bulging that direction medially. So it does look like she's opening the medial border of her foot. Through the calcaneus, I don't see a whole lot of eversion. Probably because she's already kind of everted, like the way she lands in her heel strike. She's kind of more towards the medial part of her heel. And you can see there's a little bit of this dark shadow space on the outside of her foot. So I think she is kind of in an everted position with her foot. The cool thing is that her shin bone looks pretty vertical. She doesn't have this crazy valgus angle in her knee. She is looking like she's laterally flexing her spine to the right. But again, both arms look very hugged into her body, not letting them dangle very freely. Now, I want to wonder about hypermobility, not necessarily like global hypermobility or some kind of soft tissue or connective tissue issue, but it does look like she's holding her arms like that quite a bit. And I wonder if there's been a history of like shoulder dislocations. I've seen that in a few people I can think of, just really having a flexed spine and elbows that look really hypermobile like that into extension, but the arms staying really tight. Like, I wonder if there's been some dislocations in one or both shoulders. Anyway, let's get her through into, oh, one last thing to say here is it doesn't look like she really has much of a change in her pelvis. We want to see more of like a hiking on the right side, but her pelvis stays pretty flat, and we want to see a pelvis shifting to the right. Hers looks like it's still over here on the left. So there's not a lot of adduction going on in her right hip, unfortunately, which makes sense if that's where she's having some ankle and knee discomfort. Now, in terms of her right shoulder, she says she gets some tension, tightness, sometimes painful through her neck and trap. So if we look at this right side neck and trap, what you can see, I should change color, is actually that this stuff is all quite long right now. The muscles are stretched out and lengthened in reflecting this side bend of her spine, where her shoulder's actually lower on the right side, which will be pulling some tension through that side. So it could be a case of you don't want to stretch that shoulder out too much, at least in that particular context. Let's see what happens as we go into mid stance. On the right, we don't really see her foot supinating here. It should start to supinate the moment her left foot leaves the ground. It actually looks like her pelvis doesn't rotate in the correct direction. So with her right foot forward, we want to see her pelvis rotating to the left. It doesn't really look like it's rotating much. But then when she starts to go into mid stance on the right and her left leg swings forward, what that should do is rotate her pelvis to the right, as her right foot, in theory, should start to supinate. But what it looks like is her pelvis doesn't rotate to the right. But she does kind of swing this arm forward right from the shoulder. And she does kind of swing this arm out to the side here. The left arm looks like it abducts to the side a little bit. Okay, let's see how that plays out. Again, she's still quite flexed in the thoracics. Actually here, when her foot is pronated, that's where we'd like to see her thoracics really extend. That's the one moment in time actually that the spine extends, is when we are in a pronation on the front leg. Okay, well, let's see how this plays out into a left heel strike. Now we can kind of get the sense that as her left leg swings forward, she is getting her weight to travel over there a little more. Let's just compare that to what happened when her right leg swung forward. So there's that. And I have the sense she's going a little farther there, maybe even taking a bit longer of a stride. Her back heel comes up off the ground a little more, kind of showing us that she's committing more weight into her left foot. If you recall, in her right heel strike, her left heel is still quite down on the floor, whereas in her left heel strike, she's got a little bit more lift off there. Now it's interesting. Not sure if this is just the lighting. Might be a trick of the lighting, but I'm looking at her spine. See how she's kind of over to the right side with her spine here? Like it kind of looks like if we made a little box around her rib cage and a little box around her pelvis, that she's got a rib cage over to the right and a pelvis over to the left. And does she stay that way? Yeah, I would say she kind of stays with that organization of her rib cage over to the right and her pelvis more shifted to the left. And that gives us this look like there's a little like a little lateral flexion in her spine. I can't tell if that's the lighting, but it looks like her spine's kind of leaning to the right, and then at the very top, kind of flexing to the left a little bit, which is what we'd see with a, I just were to draw this out, if we have a, oops, let's do that again. Come on, thingy, let me draw. So a pelvis that's over to the left side and a rib cage that's really exaggerated over to the right side, we'd see this sort of shape happening, which I think is what we're seeing in her spine here, is that kind of leaning to the right. And her left shoulder doesn't quite go down. It still looks like her right shoulder is lower, so she's still getting all this potential tension in that whole right side through the trap in the neck. But it's really interesting how in multiple phases, she still seems to have her rib cage hanging over to the right side. And this actually is the correct kind of organization we'd want to see for a left heel strike. We do want to have a pelvis rotating or shifting left, and for a brief moment, leaving the rib cage over to the right as a counterbalance, kind of to slow down how quickly the body might be crashing into that heel. I think it's something we talk about in Anatomy in Motion in the flow motion model discussion around heel strike, is that we do want to have the upper body lagging behind a little bit, because this is the moment when the body is really landing on the heel. And the heel's a very solid bone. It's got some fatty tissue there to cushion it, but we still don't want the whole body just crashing into it all at once. So it's almost this graded pelvis goes, but it kind of leaves the upper body behind. So it's a little bit softer of a landing. So this is all good, but it's not happening the same way on the right, is it? On the right side, she is kind of just leaning into that right foot, and her right foot is that more everted foot. So it's not really set up for a correct heel strike. So that is super interesting. All right, so let's continue from where we left off with the left heel strike. Boom. And we'll see what happens when she goes into a left foot pronation. Interesting. I almost want to say this foot looks more like it is more everted, and this leg is more of a valgus shape than her right side. We do see a bit more of a hike in her pelvis, which is probably what's giving rise to more of that shape of the leg there. But her spine is very straight up and down. So what it looks like is missing from Ashley's system right now is a pelvis height on the right, also a shift to the right is missing. However, her spine doesn't seem to want to laterally flex to the left. It just it either goes right or it goes into this straight line thing we're seeing. So what kind of phases does that leave us with? Well, if we can't do either this hike or the shift of the pelvis, then we can't really adduct the right leg, which means all of the phases of gait with the right leg forwards or standing on the right leg are not going to be as easy to access. It looks like what we want her body to be able to do is that. This is the pelvis and this is her spine. We want her to shift her pelvis right and get the spine to laterally flex to the left, which actually shows up as a right heel strike. So some of the clues or mechanics we might want her to be able to access better might be ones that show up in a right heel strike, but that could be anywhere in the body, not just in the legs. It might be something to do with her spine, actually. If there was any kind of accident that would have impacted how well her spine can laterally flex to the left, that's going to make it very challenging for her to get into a right heel strike. So that's kind of interesting. So what's keeping her on this left leg? And what's keeping her from laterally flexing her spine to the left? And oh, that's an interesting moment right there. Yeah, it looks like this is a nice, comfy hangout place for her. Well, maybe not comfy, but she seems very settled in to her left leg here in comparison to, if we look again at her right mid stance. She looks like she's trying to get out of that leg. Like you can kind of see right from when her left foot picks up from the floor, she's already starting to get out of that leg, shift over to the left. Whereas when she gets into her left mid stance here. She continues to settle into that left hip. Whoops. And she kind of stays there. That's my impression anyway. So I really want to know why it's so difficult for her to laterally flex her spine to the left, because what doesn't really make sense is that she is hiking her pelvis, but there's no lateral flexion left through her spine. In theory, that hike on the left should draw her spine into this laterally flexed to the left shape. But hers, come on, hers looks very straight up and down. How is that happening? I want to see her from a front view, and let's see if there's anything that gives us more information here. All right, so we'll get her into a right heel strike, which is a phase that I mentioned might be one of the more challenging ones for her to access mechanically. We can see a little bit of a pelvis hike on the left. And again, that leaning of her body to the right. Let's watch for when her toes on the right foot come onto the floor completely. We'll say it's there. Interesting angle of this back foot here on the left, isn't it? Okay, so I don't know if this is a glitch, but look at this here. We'll have to look at another footstep. So her toes go down, and then she swings her left leg forward, and wait for it. Her toes right there go up again and then back down. So it's like she's wobbling on the outside of her foot. I want to see if that happens in other footsteps or if that's just a one-time glitch. So let's see her go again into this right foot pronation. Toes go down. And then watch. It's probably just a one-time glitch, but you just don't know. Yeah, that doesn't really happen again, does it? Most footsteps are going to be pretty much the same overall, but of course there's going to be some variability. Okay, well, let's go back then and not worry about that too much. Just always have to double check things just in case. So from the front view, something I've been looking at lately is how much of a kick and extension in the knee happens in heel strike before the heel goes down to the floor. Let's see what the right leg was like. It looks like less extension in the right knee. Like right here, her knee's extending. But compare that to her left leg, it looks like there's a whole lot more squishiness into extension in that knee. So I wonder, like in the beginning we said, and this right leg supinate, extension of the knee is part of a supination of the leg. That just looks better organized on the left side. On both back legs, we see this interesting angle that her leg is at. So she's not really rolling through her first metatarsal. She's kind of going off to the side of her foot there. So I wonder if either of her big toes can extend very well. Both sides seem to be doing the same thing. And when both sides are doing the same thing, it's often useful to assess what's happening in the middle, the pelvis, spine, rib cage, neck, and skull, and all those central structures. Do we have good sagittal plane motion accessible in all ends of the spectrum? In particular, when the pelvis goes into a posterior tilt, so if this is the front and this is the back, pelvis like this kind of shape, that posterior tilt should give us supination of the feet if you're standing with your feet side by side. And that supination of the feet is going to give us that extension, or couple with, whoops, what's happening? Extension of the big toe. So since we noticed her lumbars were quite full extended, I wonder if she can flex her lumbars, posterior tilt her pelvis, and supinate both feet just in a bilateral stance. Like this moment right here, when we see her foot finally in a fully pronated position, she's like just on the tip of her toe there. We want really both sides of the foot, the first and fifth metatarsals down. We want her foot to be kind of there still on the back leg while her front leg's getting into supination. Just trying to see what's different about both of her ankles here. So when she goes from her heel strike on the left, she does seem to land with a bit more of a dorsiflexed ankle, which is good. We want the weight to be as far back on the heel as possible on heel strike so that there's a space to roll from as the foot descends to the floor to pronation. And what it looks like for sure is when her left foot gets into pronation, she has a bit more of her right foot still in contact with the ground behind her. But in comparison to when her right foot lands, I don't know if there's as much dorsiflexion in that ankle. Let's go back and look. Like that just looks like a bit more. You can see more of the bottom of her foot here. And here, it looks like there's less. It's maybe a minuscule difference, but I want to say lacking a bit of dorsiflexion on this right ankle. It's really tough for me to see in this video how much her foot is actually moving when it lands on the ground, how well the quality of the pronation is taking place. But her left side just looks a bit more dynamic. Like you might look at this and say, well, that's a bigger valgus angle. But it seems to be synchronized better when she goes on her right foot. Like there isn't that same kind of angle in her leg here. It looks a little bit more of just a rigid landing. And here it just looks a bit more squishy and like she's absorbing shock better. It doesn't look like this tip of her toe ever quite goes down to the ground. So remember what we said earlier about it looking like she had more of a bunion on that right big toe, and there might be less happening above. Well, there's certainly less happening in her pelvis hiking. There's certainly less adduction of her leg. And I don't know if it really looks like there's that much of an E version in her rear foot. It looks just quite straight up and down here. So if I were to really guess, I mean, my logical mind would go to, well, this looks more of like a bad angle through her leg. It looks too extreme. But actually, knowing that she has some complaints about her right ankle and knee, this just looks really rigid, not enough motion and too much in that big toe. So I don't know what happened, but what I want to guess is that there might have been some kind of, I always go for ankle sprains just because that's kind of like the safest guess. Most people have had ankle sprains and they do distort through the body quite a bit if they haven't been worked with. So I want to guess this to be kind of safe. Ankle sprain. I want to guess if there's been any falls on her coccyx, falls on her back, because her spine does look quite rigid. And I really do feel in Ashley's case that some look into if there has been some accidents to anything in her spine, pelvis or rib cage, or skull or neck, that rigidity there, I would want to see what happens if we can, as a start point, just get some sagittal plane motion into her spine. And then inquire about why is the pelvis not wanting to go to the right, and what's with the look of rigidity in that leg? Where is it coming from? Was there actually some kind of injury to the foot or ankle, an actual injury to the right knee? Can we supinate that leg, meaning can we extend the knee? Can we supinate the foot? Can we externally rotate the leg? Those would be my starting questions. So Ashley, thanks for sending in your video. Let us know. Fill in the gaps in my mind. I would most appreciate it. If anyone else has any questions, comments, observations you'd like to share, pop them in the comments as per usual. I'm really looking forward to hearing back from you, Ashley, so I can help my brain comprehend these patterns we're seeing. Thanks so much for watching, and please tune in next time for another gait video. Have an excellent day.